Welcome back to the 1009 podcast. We got a twofer for you again. We got me and Grayson. Jacob is allegedly battling the flu right now. I know he was at a unnamed person's wedding this weekend, so he's definitely recovering from that. But yeah, me and Grayson, we're just going to recap the weekend. Another crazy weekend. We saw Pac-12 probably lose its hopes of getting into the playoffs. Well, its last hope is USC. TCU made a statement win. LSU, big statement win. NFL, yeah, statement wins with the Vikings. Obviously, the Panthers won on Thursday night. Um, I predicted that. I bet the cover, bet the Panthers to cover, and they straight up won. So, just another solid weekend. We got Rookie of the Year announcements tonight. J Rod won it for the AL, and we're still waiting to hear back from the NL for a 2 hour show for this. That could be 5 minutes.
Yeah, we should hear in about 30-ish minutes, so we should catch a live reaction here, and I don't know where I'll put it in the show post-edit, but we'll have it for you, and hopefully, well, we know what team it's going to be. We just don't know if it's going to be our guy Spencer Strider or the outfielder Michael Harris down in Atlanta. So they're interviewing Brendan Donovan right now. I don't really know why. He really has no chance, but deserves to be there. Sure, why not?
You got to have three. Who else were they going to throw in there?
I, O'Neal Cruz for ratings. I have no clue.
Before we get into the football, this just popped in my head with baseball since we're talking about it. But the Astros got rid of their GM after
There
winning the
was
World
some
Series.
like hours after. There's definitely
Yeah,
tension in that front office. I mean, we'll know more as time goes on, like usual. But I mean, just very surprising to see some friction up at the top in the front office of an organization that has really dominated the AL and just got another championship, like you mentioned. So it's a very weird headline. And again, time will tell. Things will leak on Twitter like they usually do. And but right now, it's very confusing.
yeah. And also, before we get into football, this goes on the side of football, but some bad news coming out of Charlottesville this morning. A former player for the University of Virginia shot and killed three other football players and wounding two other students on campus late last night. Just something you don't want to see. One guy was from Dorchester in South Carolina, one from North Carolina, one in Miami. So it's just an unfortunate thing to see a team go through this, especially for a first year like Elliott. You're never prepared for something like this.
No, I mean it's unimaginable. That's just something you see on social media. I saw it this morning. I was asleep, I guess, as it happened. I woke up to just a lot of notifications that made no sense. Like you mentioned, Tony Elliott is there. A couple of guys that spent their playing days along with us at Clemson up there as assistants as well. So there's a Clemson connection to say the least. But I mean, yeah, it's you never really understand these things, but just I mean, it just goes to show you that we put athletes on a pedestal, but they're not even exempt from tragedies like this that we see, a lot of places, a lot of times, unfortunately. So it almost doesn't feel real, just as insane as that is. I think he was at large through the night into the late morning before he was in custody, but they thankfully found him before he did any more harm. But yeah, just
Yeah.
former walk on, some sort of situation with a school trip on a bus. I don't really know a whole lot, so I won't go into too much detail. But like you mentioned, tragic to say the least. And yeah, after a great weekend of football and sports, some cold reality on a Monday morning.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how you can play the rest of the season. I know they're going to try
No,
to, but they're not all going to be in the same headspace.
I think men's basketball will not play tonight either. I'm assuming that's across campus with any athletics, but yeah, I think for days or weeks to come, it will be quiet on the sports front there as they come together and deal with this stuff.
And I think they got the right coach to kind of handle a situation like that. Because I mean, we saw while we were at our time at Clemson, two former players pass away with running backs, and Elliott obviously knew them well, and the running backs we had at the time knew this too as well. So I mean, I don't mean it in a bad way, but he's kind of been in a situation like this where he's seen two of his former players unfortunately pass away. So, um, just still in a situation you don't expect to be in. So, he's definitely the right guy for that.
Right. I mean, he showed an ability to lead men exceptionally well at Clemson, even just having that smaller running back room, and now he's expanded that role to a full team. So, I'm sure whatever he feels in his heart's the right thing to do up there will guide them through it. So,
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, I don't think we see them on the field. They've got 2 or 3 games left. They're not going bowling anyway, I don't think. And so I think that we might just not see them on the field this year, and that's certainly understandable.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's get back on a lighter note. Just another great weekend of football. Like we mentioned off the top of the show, Pac-12 lost pretty much two spots in the playoffs, or at least two contenders. Oregon just blowing it against Washington, and same for UCLA against Arizona. Um, the whole situation with Bo Nix was weird. Like, what,
Yeah, it was
did he
almost
hurt his
Tua
ankle or his
esque.
head or was it his arm? But he was doing jumping jacks on like it was
Yeah, he
a
was
whole
trying to
weird
demonstrate he could
situation.
go out there and play still. I think it was clear that that probably wasn't the best thing, but I mean, you understand guys want to go out there and tough it out. Um, so I respect the initiative to try and get back out there for the team, but I just don't know. I mean, the backup, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, and I watched him play a couple snaps, so I
Yeah,
realized that's a drop off, but I mean, the play that cost them the game was nothing to do with Knicks. I mean, the Hail Mary, if you can even call it that, just had no chance. But I mean, they go for it on their own 34-yard line on a
fourth.
fourth and
Yeah,
one.
was he on the
I,
field though? I don't think he was.
I don't think he was. No, I
This
don't
is
care
like,
who's on the field.
yeah,
I mean, you can have LeGarrette Blunt on the field again. I don't understand that. Why in the world are you doing that?
yeah, it was weird. But I mean, if you
I
don't
don't
have your
understand.
go-to star quarterback on the field, 4th and 1, it basically just says, "Hey, we're running the ball right at the middle." Like it's a dead giveaway. Like,
I mean, maybe if you still have Travis Dye there, I don't understand it.
yeah,
And obviously, Washington took full advantage. That's about a 50 and change kick from where they got it, and they drove the ball enough, kicked a field goal, 51 seconds left, and then it was desperation time for the Ducks, and they couldn't get it done, so they lose as a 2 touchdown favorite, I think, outright. I
13
mean,
and a half, 14 and a half,
yeah,
something
it
like
was.
that.
I mean, this was a game they were expected to win. I know Penix and that passing offense, one other, if not the best in the country, but I mean, in Allison under the lights, this team knew what was in front of them. First year head coach, but still, he was part of a championship program last year. So I just very, very weird. Uh, you
Yeah,
know, I figured when they lined up to go for it, they were going to just try and get an offsides and then bring the punt team out. I don't know why you thought you could defend 34 yards better than 60 something. It made no sense, and
yeah.
it cost them a playoff spot in the end. So
I mean, it's one of those situations. If you convert it, you look like a genius. If you don't, you're an idiot. So,
right,
uh, just unfortunate. But they weren't the only playoff or the Pac-12 team to have its playoff hopes vanish. UCLA just, what are you doing against Arizona? I'm pretty sure Arizona fired their coach this year.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is a team that we saw score with Southern Cal for a good bit of time recently. So I mean, this offense with DeLara at quarterback certainly capable of a game like this. I mean, it was 14-0 Arizona before you could really blink. They ended up kicking a field goal late to go up 6 with a minute left, and then UCLA couldn't get a touchdown to extend their playoff hopes as well. This is their second loss too, so now it's down to Southern Cal out of the Pac-12 with a 12-1 path to the playoff.
Yeah. But Oregon's still a good team. UCLA's still a good team. I mean,
Right.
Southern Cal still has to play UCLA this week. I don't know how the Pac-12 championship's going to end up. I think it's a coastal chaos for sure out there with like 4 or 5 teams that are sitting there right at 1 loss, 2 loss. I
Right.
think Washington still has an outside chance of getting in. So it's a whole mess up there. So USC's their best hope. Um, I mean, they smoked Colorado, but that's Colorado, like big
Yeah.
whoop.
Who isn't? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So Pac-12 pretty much is almost done except for USC, but a
Right.
team
Yeah.
that gave themselves a better resume is TCU taking down Texas, which Texas is not back
No,
at all.
they're not. That game was not as close as the final score indicates. Pretty fluky scoop and score bounced Texas's way that made that game even conceivably close. I watched just about every snap of the game. It was defense on defense early. If you had the over, you had no chance. This was just busted plays, bad pass protection. QB's trying to run around and make things happen, but could barely even do that. But TCU made the plays they had to.
Oh my
Their
gosh.
wide receiver talent shone through, and they got the win. And I think that, like I mentioned last week, the thing that makes the least amount of sense usually happens in the Big 12. And here we see TCU now 10-0, and with all the playoff hopes in the world out in front of them, their biggest obstacle left is going to be the postseason with the Big 12 championship game. So
Yeah. When your offense has a total yardage of 199, like Texas offense had, that's not a recipe for winning.
no,
So Quinn Ewers is having some weird, just inaccurate past couple games. I know people
right.
might think he's hurt or something still from that shoulder, which
I think he's also still like 18 years old. I mean, this is
yeah,
Trevor Lawrence ruined the expectations for every high market, I guess, now with NIL QB prospect as a true freshman for at least another couple of years.
yeah.
Uh, because what
Unless
he
Arch
did in year
Manning comes in
one,
and but then Arch
even
is going to be
still, I mean,
behind Quinn Ewers probably.
when the bar is beat Nick Saban by 28 points in a national championship game,
Yeah.
I mean, you ain't doing that. I mean, even what Drake May's doing as a redshirt freshman, um, you
The
know,
thing with Drake May is he didn't have as much hype come around him, so he kind of
no,
flew
it's
under the
true. Yeah,
radar. All he had to
right,
do was replace Sam Howell, which I mean, tough task
right.
for a UNC quarterback, but
For that program, absolutely.
yeah, but uh, people expected a lot more out of Ewers. I mean, we got it for
Right.
a half against Alabama. It had been cool to see what he had been able to do the whole game, but kind of seeing how things are playing out now, you start to wonder what's going on.
Yeah, and that'd just be the length of the season, the amount of hits he's taken at quarterback. He took a couple Saturday night, so he'll be fine. Texas will be fine. I don't really think that they had national championship aspirations this year. They had some injuries preseason at receiver and O line that didn't help either. But as a program, they're not back, but they're on the right track. They got the talent there. It could be worse. They could be A&M. So I mean, it's I wouldn't panic yet.
Yeah. The rest of the top three pretty much cruised. I mean, Georgia beat Mississippi 45-19.
Yeah.
Ohio State beat Indiana 56-14. Michigan beat Nebraska 34-3. And then, I mean, you can throw it down to Tennessee too. They beat Missouri 66-24. So, just a bunch of lopsided victories.
Right. I mean, the SEC games were closer than you'd imagine. I had Georgia first half minus, I think, 9, and Mississippi State kicks a field goal with a minute left, cut it to, I don't know, inside 2 scores, and then Georgia goes 3-and-out, kicks it or punts it to Mississippi State, who houses the punt return because why not? So that was my worst beat of the season by far.
Yeah.
But I mean, second half, talent shown through. It wasn't a Mizzou situation. And then Mizzou cut it to 28-24, middle of
It was
third
tight
quarter.
there for a little bit.
Right. And then, 38 straight points from the Vols
Yeah.
put it well out of reach. And, to the casual fans, most of which reside in Rocky Top, blowout win, no chance for an upset. But it was trending towards maybe a situation like Georgia found themselves up in Mizzou. But
Yeah.
they pulled away much earlier and much more emphatically. So the top 5 really.
Yeah. But
I wouldn't say, yeah, they cruised
yeah.
in the end.
I mean, there were some good SEC games this week. LSU clinched the SEC West surprisingly. No one
Yeah.
had that pretty much at the beginning of the year.
Nope.
Cause I mean they went down and beat Arkansas in a pretty much a frozen tundra game. Water is warmer than ice, in case anybody was wondering.
It
That
was man-made frozen tundra because
Yeah.
I'm sure their grounds crew is great. Do not spray water on ice in freezing conditions. That is just
Yeah.
the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. So they got really acclimated with some shovels out there and thankfully had the playing surface ready. So I will give them credit for that. But yeah, 13-10 LSU, they just kept
And
winning.
boy, do they have a stud on defense.
Yeah.
Number 40, Harold Perkins is
Yeah.
a monster. That dude he pretty much had 2 strip sacks, but one got called back because the arm wasn't moving forward.
Right.
He had like 7 sacks, I believe. He was just all over the field. He was supposed to go to A&M, but LSU
Right.
pulled it out towards the end. The dude's a game record, playmaker, whatever you want to call it. 9 total tackles, 5 solos, 2.5 tackles for losses. So, and a forced fumble.
Right.
Um, the dude just made plays. Like there's no way
Every
else to
time they
put it.
dropped back, he was there.
Yeah, and he's a
Every single
freshman
time.
too.
Right, true freshman. That's going to be a player like that can really galvanize the whole defense for at least the 2 more years he's guaranteed to be there. If he keeps his play up, it will be 2 years, and that will be it. But
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if Brian Kelly recruits talent around him, look out for this LSU team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly's a good coach. There's no, he's a weird coach. Like, yeah, he bit the bullet with the whole family situation, but if he's able to recruit
Right.
like people knows he can and get a team to a playoff, like he's going to be able to get different players than he was able to at Notre Dame because of their requirements to get into the school. So
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years down the road we see a LSU deep in the playoffs. 2 years down the road,
I mean,
especially with the
really,
way he coaches, and you never know.
that might be the best program in the SEC West as far as positioning when Saban retires. I mean,
Yeah,
if they're coming off an embarrassing early loss, they got blown up by Tennessee. I just don't think as a team they were quite ready for that road environment. But I mean, there's talk of them as a 2-loss team in the playoff. I don't think I'd buy it. They'd have to really destroy Georgia, which
yeah, and need
it's
some
not
help
going to
from
happen.
other teams.
And they would just need absolute mayhem. It's not going to happen. Not to say that they're not among the 4 best teams in the country, but I think as fluky as that Florida State loss is technically, as early as it was, I just don't think they get a pass for it. And like I said, the third loss is coming in Atlanta in a couple weeks, so
Yeah,
that spread opened at like 16 points, I think, which maybe a touch high, but
and
bottom line,
we'll probably see it drop a little bit closer to
right?
the game
We,
time. So
we know who's winning that game, and it's not Brian
yeah,
Kelly. So, but I
but
mean, SEC West title in year one. I mean,
yeah, great first season.
right?
But I mean, that comes to the hands of a just very down Alabama team,
By
considerably
their own
speaking.
standards, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They're just undisciplined and no weapons on the outside. Like Gibbs wasn't even
No,
used all that much in this game. Like, don't know if nobody knew if he was hurt or anything, but they used their other 2 running backs, and you just look at Bryce Young, like the dude just needs help. He's making all the plays he can, and he's
right.
I don't know what else to say about Alabama except like this is probably one of the worst teams that Saban's had under his tenure outside of
As a
like the first
road
two or
team,
three
it has to
years.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a road team in the playoff era, this is probably the worst one. I mean, this is just it's every week, and they keep catching these big numbers, and it's like, why in the hell am I betting them to win against anybody on the road by 2 touchdowns? And they haven't. They did against Arkansas, which they're one of 3 or 4 teams in a row to beat that Arkansas team that was kind of like Kentucky and Ole Miss earlier on the season, just didn't lose and got propped up a bit too high in the AP poll. But I mean,
Just
this
because
is
they're in the SEC.
right. They can thank Saban for that. But it's just I don't understand it. I really don't. You mentioned the receiver talent. I mean, we're about to watch Devonta Smith. There's no one close to that
Yeah.
on this team. I mean, it's
And that
just
Burton transferring from Georgia, and he has
yeah,
like 5 catches this year,
right. It's
and
not
he
been
would have
the
been
impact guy they expected.
probably would have been a featured wide receiver there.
Right. It's yeah. I mean, grass isn't always greener, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is I just don't know. It's not even that Bryce Young has a foot in the NFL and doesn't care. He's doing everything he can. It's still not
Hmm.
enough, which is just more credit to him, and that will be reflected in where he goes in the NFL draft. I think he's top 5, even barring some sort of Larry Tunsil situation. I just think that he could go 1. Honestly, I'm not really tuned into mock drafts yet because in November they don't matter. But
Yeah.
as far as QBs go, I think it's him and Stroud up the top. Hendon
Oh,
Hooker, if he wasn't
yeah.
25 years old, I think would be in that conversation. But you don't want to
There's
pay a QB at 30 off his rookie
no.
deal. So I think that through no fault of his own, he's not going to be in the number 1 QB conversation. But I mean, this is just very odd to see
Yeah.
some cracks in the dynasty in Tuscaloosa.
I'll tell you one quarterback that has probably played his way off of draft boards, but knowing how Mel Kiper and Todd McShay love a good white quarterback, Will Levis at Kentucky is not doing himself any favors.
How many times have I said that kid is getting an entire front office fired?
I mean,
And he plays worse and worse. I don't understand it. I mean, Chris Rodriguez is very talented running back next to him.
yeah, he ripped off like a 70-something yarder during the
Yeah,
game.
they've got talent. I just And Stoops has done well there at that program. I mean, with the basketball program across the street, there's really no expectations, but he's gotten that team to reasonably competitive in the SEC, and I just him and Brennan Armstrong are probably the two this year that just
Yeah,
what in the
that
world
was
happened.
2 picks in the first 2 plays. That's tough.
That's horrible.
But
That's
well, I
just
mean,
lightning striking twice. But,
I know it was like just terrible conditions. It was sleeting, it was snowing, it was
right.
raining up in Lexington,
Yeah.
but 11 for 23, 109 yards and an interception.
That doesn't fly in
Yeah, and that's against
varsity high
Vandy.
school. That's
Yeah,
just not right.
that's
Who
against
won their
Vandy,
first
who has
conference game in like 10 years.
26. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were like on a 26 game conference streak, losing streak or whatever.
Right.
But outside Levis, I mean, like we mentioned Rodriguez, he had 18 carries for 162 yards. Feed him
Right.
the ball, you win that game.
You show me that,
Like,
I tell you they win by 10. Yeah. I mean, that's
yeah.
at
But
least.
shout out to Vandy for getting their first conference win in
Yeah.
3 years, 4 years, or 20,
And
however long 26 games is for conference. So
a long time. That's probably 4 years.
yeah, I
I mean,
think so.
that's a long time. Clark Lee's, doing what he can at the program with the lowest expectations the whole conference. I mean, we've seen what has transpired in Kansas with Lance Leipold, so they're not near that trajectory yet. They don't have a kid like Jalen Daniels in there, but I mean,
That quarterback they got, he's pretty athletic because he,
yeah,
he ripped off like a
it's a
60
step
yarder,
in
I
the right
think, too.
direction. Yeah, he was playing his heart out, and it showed, and they got the win.
I mean,
And you mentioned the terrible weather, so
theoretically, they could be bowl eligible. They just had to beat Texas A&M and Tennessee.
I they might beat A&M as bad as they are,
Yeah.
but they're not beating. As much as I would love to see that, they're not beating Tennessee.
So, yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the SEC and how that ended up. We talked about Pac-12, Big 12. I mean, Big 10. There wasn't much going on out there outside of
No,
I mean, Iowa won. There's that.
they might win the Big Ten West. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. That is where we do not, or the Big 10 needs to get rid of
no,
divisions like the ACC
yeah,
would do next year. The SEC, well, no, the SEC is probably fine. The
yeah,
SEC is probably the only conference that can do it.
right.
But
Assuming LSU and Tennessee are there to stay, but yeah,
yeah,
um,
but I mean, and then getting into the ACC, got the conference championship games got locked up. Clemson will be facing the Tar Heels out of North Carolina. Surprisingly, after pretty much everybody predicted Miami
right,
to
yeah,
make it, and look where they got. But shout out to Miami for getting me that bet. Um, someone called me stupid for doing that on this show, but we're just gonna leave that. But yeah, I mean, it was a win. Like it wasn't a solid, a all around perfect performance. I mean, Will
no,
Shipley had a game. DJ was better than last week.
right.
Uh, defense looked good. I'd say. I mean,
The
secondary is
TD
still
late
terrible.
was
Yeah.
annoying as shit. I'll say that. And I
Uh,
realized we're up. What was it 31-10 at that point? No one really cares. But like, I mean, one more play, really? We gotta pretend like that game was close.
yeah.
Really?
I think it was what kind of like the NC State game where they scored a late touchdown.
Well, we did too, but yeah, we traded. Then Florida State got the one late and had the
Yes,
onside.
that's what it
But
was.
yeah, so I mean, I I'm smart enough to look past the box score. It appears many people out in the media universe are not.
No.
Thankfully, the playoff committee seems to be held to a higher standard than that, which is why we're higher in that poll than the AP. But it's just I don't know. The discourse in general is we need a lot of help to make the playoff, and that's
Yeah.
accurate. So I mean, it's if these two teams go in 11-1 to Charlotte, that might be an elimination game if TCU falls in
Mm-hmm.
that same Saturday. I'm not sure how kickoffs will work out there. If we can actually scoreboard watch, that'll be going concurrently as far as kickoffs go. But I mean, is one loss TCU in? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Is one loss USC in? Absolutely. So
Yes.
that's
Name
your
brand.
that's your third behind. Obviously, we got Georgia and the winner of the Big Ten, or I guess really the winner of Michigan Ohio State. But
Yeah.
and then I think the only team that would beat us out would be USC. I mean, I realize 11-1 Tennessee is tempting. They've bubbled up like a very poor man's 2019 LSU. I'm glad that has died as a comparison. It was ridiculous to start with, but I I don't see how a 12-1 ACC champ with a win over a top 10 foe to win the conference is going to be left out over Tennessee. I don't care how
Yeah.
good the story is. It makes no sense. And
I just
LSU and Alabama are great 2 wins, but I just don't see it.
yeah, I think the unfortunate thing for both Clemson and NC or North Carolina is how we fared against Notre Dame.
Right,
That
yeah.
and
We
that
could both go undefeated in conference, but that Notre Dame, which
yeah.
nationally ranked now, Notre Dame, they had an ugly finish to a game against Navy. Uh, they put up 35 and a half, and then I don't know if they even scored after that.
No.
Navy cut it to 3 late, so then that game was another situation where it was a lot more out of reach than the score indicated. But I mean, give credit to Navy. They fought 4 quarters, and Notre Dame took their foot off the gas, which we're very familiar with. So
Yeah. And pretty much just to wrap up the Clemson game, Barrett Carter's a stud, um,
yes,
which obviously showed we missed him against Syracuse. He wasn't out for Notre Dame, was he? Or is one of we were also missing a linebacker against Notre Dame. I know that.
it might have been him. Honestly, I remember a
Yeah.
text right before kickoff, and I think it was there.
Yeah. So him, Trotter, and Simpson are just playmakers. We know our front seven is good. I was talking with I mentioned him a couple times, but Cam over there at Chatting Average and all that. They're big UNC fans, and he said, "I'll give you an insight to this game. If you can run Will Shipley, y'all are going to beat us." And I responded with, "If you're able to pass, you're going to beat us." Like it's going to be a matchup of which defense of unit shows up more, where it be our pass defense or their rush defense.
Right. I mean, it's going to come down to pressure and filling gaps to stop the run.
Yeah.
I would certainly hope that our defensive line, given the huge talent gap and performance gap, frankly, with what Gene Chisley's done down there with the defense, that we would prevail. But we saw some very strange things up in South Bend that hopefully won't repeat themselves. So
Yeah. And this offense is just the play
yeah,
calling. The first 9 plays, the scripted plays are good.
right.
And then once we get off the scripted plays, it's a brain aneurysm.
It's and I love Street, but it's definitely frustrating because it
Yeah.
seems like not a whole lot is evolving. And I realize, like Alabama, this skill talent out wide at receiver isn't what it usually is. You see a lot of the guys that have come through playing on Sundays for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Alabama, obviously. So I mean, it's that part's frustrating too. But a lot of the same coaches there, for better or for worse, that brought the talent in that got us those championship runs is still there. So I mean, especially if we bring Jeff Scott back in the fold in some form or fashion, which I don't know if he'd be open to that. I